It started on a rainy Tuesday morning in October when I missed my usual train to work because I spilled coffee on my blouse and had to rush back upstairs to change it. It was the kind of chaos that usually ruins your day, but that morning it changed mine forever. I ran into the nearly empty carriage of the next train, slightly damp, still buttoning up my clean shirt, and dropped into the first available seat across from a man reading a book. I recognized the cover instantly. It was an old poetry collection I loved in college. Not exactly a popular title, and something about seeing it in his hands made me pause. He looked up at me and smiled a subtle, knowing smile, like he already understood the coincidence and the way my eyes gave me away. He said something about the book. The line he quoted wasn't even the most famous one, but it was my favorite. I don't know how he guessed it, but it made my skin prickle in a way that had nothing to do with the chill in the air. We started talking quietly at first about poetry, then somehow about weather and missed trains, and whether it meant fate or just bad luck. I remember laughing more than I had in weeks, maybe months by the time. The train stopped at my station. I didn't want to get off, and I almost didn't. He asked if I wanted to get coffee, and I surprised myself by saying yes. I told myself it was just coffee, but even then I think I knew better his name was Ethan. He had soft hands and a warm voice, and eyes that lingered just a little too long, but not in a way that felt wrong more. Like he saw things people didn't usually see or didn't bother noticing. We ended up talking for almost 2 hours. Neither of us checked the time until I realized I was ridiculously late for work. I told him I had to go, but that I wouldn't mind running into him again. He smiled and said he'd be on that train again the next morning, same time, same carriage. I didn't even think about how easily he assumed I'd be there too, but of course. I was the next day and the one after, and we kept meeting in that carriage like it was a secret room no one else knew about. We never made plans, it just happened, like we both needed that a little space away from everything, and soon coffee turned into lunch, and lunch turned into drinks, and drinks turned into dinners where I wore lipstick I never wore for my husband and lingered in the mirror too long. I didn't tell Ethan. I was married not at first, and when I did, he just looked at me for a long moment and said, "I thought so," but his voice was soft and not accusing, just sad, like he knew this kind of story already and maybe had lived through one before. And then one night when the restaurant was too loud and my third glass of wine made my skin buzz and my laugh stick to the back of my throat, he touched my hand across the table and didn't let go, and I didn't pull away, and we ended up outside in the rain again, like the first day. And this time when we kissed, it didn't feel like a mistake. It felt like something I'd been aching for without Eve. Knowing it, we didn't go to a hotel, not right away. We stood pressed against the wet bricks of a building I didn't even see, and his mouth was on my neck, and I heard my name in a way that didn't belong to the life I'd built, and then I whispered his name too, and it didn't feel wrong. It felt like remembering something I'd forgotten too long. We made it to a hotel the following week. I had to lie to my husband, tell him I was staying late at work for some team dinner, and I remember the rush of guilt and thrill mixing in my blood like two colors swirling and not quite blending. The room was small and smelled faintly of old perfume and dust, but none of it mattered because the second the door closed behind us, I wasn't his wife. I wasn't anybody's wife. I was just a woman standing in front of a man who looked at me like he'd been starving for months, and I was the first real thing he'd tasted. And when he touched me, it wasn't just sex, it was something else, something more deliberate, his fingers slow, like he was learning me by heart. And when he undressed me, I didn't feel exposed. I felt found, like he was reading me with his hands, every inch another sentence to memorize. And when we finally did it, I cried not because it hurt or because I felt guilty, but because I didn't remember the last time I felt that much in my own skin, like I belonged somewhere, like my body still had a language to speak, that someone wanted to understand, and he listened to every sound I made like it mattered, like he can map it and keep it forever. After that night, something shifted in me, not in the dramatic way people describe like thunder cracking open the sky, but in the quiet way. A river changes its course over time, slow and inevitable. I started waking up next to my husband and feeling like a ghost in my own bed, like I was wearing a costume that used to fit, but now felt tighter on the seams. Ethan and I didn't talk about what we were doing. We just kept doing it each time. A little longer, a little deeper, not just in the way our bodies moved, but in how he looked at me after like he saw the cracks. I tried to hide and didn't turn away. We started meeting in different places, once in an art gallery, where we pretended to be strangers admiring the same painting just so we could whisper things we shouldn't be, saying into each other's ears, surrounded by people who had no idea what was happening between us or how badly I wanted to feel his fingers slide just beneath the waistband of my jeans while we stood in front of a sculpture of two marble bodies tangled together once in the back of his car parked under a flickering streetlight, where we moved fast and breathless with the kind of hunger that doesn't wait for comfort or perfection. I remember the way the windows fogged up, the smell of leather and rain, the sound of his voice breaking when I whispered, "Don't stop," into his mouth. I started making excuses at home, telling my husband I was going for long walks or working late or helping a friend through a divorce sometimes. I'd look at him as he sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone, completely unaware, and I'd feel this strange combination of pity and resentment, like, how did we end up here? How did we let the quiet grow so loud? Between us, I didn't hate him. I don't even think I stopped loving him, not exactly. It's just that with Ethan, I felt alive again, felt seen and touched and wanted in a way that reminded me I wasn't just someone's wife, someone's routine. I was still a woman with heat under her skin and hunger in her bones. One afternoon, Ethan booked a hotel room in the middle of the city, soft white sheets and floor-to-ceiling windows. We met. After lunch, pretending it was just another meeting, another hour stolen from the lives we were supposed to be living. He kissed me the second the door clicked shut, like we were starving again. Like he couldn't wait to taste every inch of me, and I let him because when he was inside me, I stopped thinking about what I was doing and just felt what I'd been missing. His hands held my hips like I was something sacred, and the way he said my name when I came made my whole body arch off the bed. I didn't want it to end any of it, not the room, not the way he looked at me after, not the ache between my legs that lasted. Hours after we'd gone our separate ways, I started craving that ache more than I craved peace. I started planning my days around when I could see him again, even if just for a kiss, even if just to feel his hand brush the inside of my thigh under the table at some crowded bar. He never asked me to leave my husband, never pressured or pushed, just existed in this separate world. We'd built a world where time didn't move, and every touch felt like the first. I wondered if he was seeing anyone else, if I was just a passing thrill. But then one night after we'd made love, slowly, like it meant something, he whispered, "You undo me," in ways I didn't know I could be undone, and I felt it not just between my legs, but somewhere deep in my chest, like a string pulling tighter and tighter, and I knew I was in trouble because I was starting to imagine a life where I didn't have to lie anymore, a life where mornings began with Ethan's mouth on my shoulder and not a rehearsed smile over breakfast. I started dreaming about him every night, sometimes soft dreams, his fingers tracing circles on my bare stomach. Other times darker, my back arched against a cold wall, his mouth hot and hungry on my skin. I would wake up damp between my thighs, the sheets twisted, my husband still asleep beside me, breathing deeply, peacefully. I began to resent that peace. It felt unearned, like he was resting in a love I no longer gave. One afternoon, Ethan and I met in a bookstore, pretending again. This time we played a couple, debating which travel guide to buy, laughing like we had shared decades together. He brushed a strand of hair from my face, so casually, but I felt it all the way to my core. Later, in the back corner between philosophy and poetry, He pushed me gently against a shelf, his lips on my neck, his hand sliding up under my skirt. I gasped that my lip let him touch me right there, between the smell of paper and dust and old knowledge. I didn't care who might walk by. I wanted to be reckless. I wanted to feel alive. And with him, I did, every time. That evening when I went home, I couldn't look my husband in the eyes. Not because I felt guilty, but because I didn't want to be there. Not really. I listened to him talk about his day, nodded, smiled, pretended. But all I could think about was the way Ethan whispered "good girl" in my ear as I came undone against a bookshelf. I started sending him photos, late at night, when my husband was asleep, sometimes just my lips or the curve of my hip. Other times more, my bare chest, my thighs spread just enough to tease. Ethan responded with voice notes, deep, raspy, sometimes just the sound of him breathing. Sometimes filthy words that made me squirm under the sheets. I began to crave his voice more than I craved conversation at home. He knew how to speak to the parts of me that had been silent for years. The first time we spent the night together, I lied and said I was at a company retreat. The hotel was nicer than usual. A big bed, thick curtains, a soaking tub. We didn't rush. We undressed slowly, like we had all the time in the world. He kissed every inch of me, worshipped me, not just with his mouth, but with his patience, his attention. The way he looked at me like I was art. He made me come 3 times before he even took off his pants, and when he finally entered me, it felt like coming home, but to a home I'd never known. One built on fire and whispers and stolen time. We fell asleep tangled together, his hand on my stomach, his breath on the back of my neck. I woke up in the middle of the night and just stared at him, watched his chest rise and fall, wondered how something that felt this right could be so wrong, but the truth was, I didn't care. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to go back to being just a wife, just a routine. With Ethan, I was more. I was wanted, craved, seen, and every time I thought about ending it, about doing the right thing, I remembered the sound he made when he came inside me, that deep groan in my ear, the way he held me after, and I knew I wasn't ready to give that up. Days blurred into each other. I'd be in the kitchen stirring sauce while texting Ethan under the table. I'd fake a smile across candlelit dinners with my husband while my panties were still damp from what Ethan had whispered to me that afternoon. It became a double life, but one I was strangely good at maintaining. I became an expert at distraction, a master of timing. I'd rush to meet Ethan during lunch breaks. Sometimes we didn't even make it out of the car. I'd climb into the passenger seat, and within seconds, he'd have my dress pulled up, my leg hooked over his armrest, his mouth between my thighs, making me grip the door handle just to stay quiet. Afterward, we'd share a bottle of water, laugh about how reckless we were, how wild it was that no one ever suspected anything. Then I'd smooth my hair, fix my lipstick, and head back to the office pretending nothing had happened. But everything had happened, every time. Something in me shifted just a little more, like a door creaking open wider each day, letting in air. Light, danger. Sometimes I thought about telling my husband, just blurting it out across the dinner table, just to see his reaction, just to see what kind of fire might burn behind those tired eyes, but I never did. Part of me didn't want to hurt him. The other part didn't want to end anything, because the truth was I wanted both lives, the comfort of one, the ecstasy of the other. With Ethan, I could say anything, be anything. We'd lie in bed and I'd tell him things I never said out loud. Fears, desires, regrets. He'd listen, really listen. Then slide his hand over my chest and say, "You don't have to be anything but this right now." And I believe him. For that hour, that night, that moment, I would believe I was whole, that I wasn't betraying anyone, that maybe what we had wasn't even wrong, just misunderstood. One night we tried something new, a hotel with a mirror on the ceiling. I laid back, watched him on top of me, his back muscles flexing, my legs wrapped tight around his waist. Watching us from above was almost surreal, like witnessing a version of myself I didn't recognize, wild, unapologetic, his hands gripping my wrists above my head, his hips driving into me until I gasped so loud I bit my own shoulder to muffle it. Afterward, he lay beside me, sweat cooling on our skin, and whispered, "You ruined me? You know that?" I didn't answer, just smiled and let my fingers trace circles over his chest. Because the truth was, he ruined me too, in the most beautiful way. We started having longer weekends together. He'd book us an Airbnb out of town, somewhere quiet, where we didn't have to pretend, where I could walk around in his t-shirt and no panties, make coffee in the morning and kiss him slow without checking the clock. We cooked together, showered together, sat in silence together without needing to fill it. One afternoon, he took a photo of me reading on the couch, sunlight on my bare legs, my glasses sliding down my nose. I told him to delete it, that it wasn't safe. He promised he would. But later I saw it as his lock screen. He didn't apologize. Just said, "You look like you, not the version you show the world. But this is you." And I felt something tighten in my chest. Back home, my husband grew suspicious. Not in a violent or angry way, but quiet, distant. He started watching me. Really watching, asking questions he never used to ask. I got better at lying, better at half smiles and vague answers. But it was wearing me down, the split between two lives, the constant ache, the guilt and the craving and the confusion. Yet every time I tried to imagine stopping, cutting Ethan off, going back to normal, I couldn't. I didn't want to. I told myself I would decide. One day, I'd pick. I'd choose. I'd be brave enough to walk away from something, but not yet. Not tonight, because tonight I was meeting Ethan again. He had a surprise for me, and I could already feel the heat pooling in my stomach, just thinking about the way his hands would feel on my skin. The surprise was a private loft tucked above an old record store, wooden beams, soft lighting, a bed that looked like it belonged in some indie film about forbidden love. He opened the door for me, that half smirk already playing at the corner of his lips. And before I could even comment on the place, he had me pressed against the wall, his mouth on mine, his hands sliding beneath my coat. My breath hitched when I felt his. Fingers move under my blouse, tracing the edge of my bra like he was memorizing every detail. "You wore this for me?" he whispered, tugging down the lace. I nodded, breathless, and he kissed me again, slower this time, deeper. We didn't even make it to the bed right away. He dropped to his knees right there on the hardwood floor, slid my panties down slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. The way he touched me that night wasn't rushed or rough, it was reverent. His tongue moved in slow circles, teasing, tasting, his fingers curling just enough to make my legs tremble. I had to grab his shoulders to keep from falling. And when I came, moaning his name with a sharp cry, I felt like I was unraveling from the inside out. He stood, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and kissed me again like he wanted to taste what he just gave me. Then he carried me to the bed, laid me down like something precious, and took his time undressing himself while I watched, aching, hungry ... When he slid inside me, it was slow, deep, like he needed to feel every inch. We moved together in rhythm, not frantic, but intense, like we were speaking a language no one else could understand. His hand slid under my neck, pulling me closer, his breath hot against my ear. "I think about you all the time," he said. Every second. Even when I shouldn't, my nails dug into his back. I whispered things I didn't know I'd been holding in. Things I hadn't said to anyone, that I didn't feel like a wife anymore. That sometimes I couldn't remember the last time I felt real at home. That I didn't know who I was unless I was with him. He didn't flinch. Didn't tell me to fix it. Just moved deeper inside me, harder, until I gasped again and held on tighter. We fell asleep wrapped around each other, bodies sticky, exhausted. I woke up in the middle of the night to find him watching me, his hand stroking my hair. He didn't say anything. Just looked at me like he was memorizing my face. Like maybe some part of him knew this couldn't last forever and he wanted to hold on to it a little longer. In the morning, he made coffee in the tiny kitchen, shirtless, barefoot, humming to himself. I sat on the counter, wearing nothing but one of his shirts, watching him, wanting to freeze the moment. He looked over his shoulder and smiled. "What?" he asked. I just shook my head. "Nothing," I lied. But really, I was thinking about how dangerous this had become, how deeply I'd fallen into something I couldn't control, and how much I didn't want to climb back out. Later that week, back home, my husband brought me flowers. He stood at the door with a half-sheepish grin and said, "I thought maybe we could have a date night. Just us." My stomach twisted. I kissed his cheek, said thank you, pretended to be surprised. And all the while, Ethan's text was glowing in my pocket. "I miss the sound you make when you come. When can I hear it again?" It didn't end with a bang. No dramatic confrontation. No crying in the rain or shattered glasses thrown across a room. It ended quietly, the way most real things do, with a slow, dull ache that settled into my chest like a stone. One evening, Ethan and I lay tangled in bed, the sheets twisted between our legs, the room smelling of sex and skin and something softer, something like goodbye. We hadn't said anything yet, but we both felt it. It was there in the pauses between our kisses, in the way his hands lingered just a little too long like they were memorizing. He looked at me, brushing a strand of hair from my cheek, and said, "If we keep doing this, we'll destroy everything." And I wanted to say, "Let it burn." I wanted to beg him to keep touching me, to make promises we couldn't keep, to tell me I was more than someone's secret. But I didn't, because I knew he was right. We were already frayed at the edges, already bleeding into the parts of our lives we tried to keep separate. We made love one last time, not rushed, not wild, slow, devastatingly slow. He kissed me like he was saying thank you, and I touched him like I was letting go. I came with my eyes open, staring into his, my fingers locked behind his neck. And when he finished, he stayed inside me for a long moment, forehead resting against mine. Neither of us said it, but we knew. I left before sunrise. No note, no dramatic exit. Just slipped into my clothes, pressed one last kiss to his bare shoulder, and walked out into the early morning cold. The city was still half asleep, everything gray and soft. I drove home in silence, my heart pounding like I'd just run miles barefoot. When I stepped into the house, my husband was still asleep. The coffee pot was already prepped. His shirt was folded on the arm of the chair. The life I had built was still there, waiting, intact. I stood in the hallway for a long time, keys in hand, thinking about how easy it would be to pretend again. And I did, for a while. I fell back into the rhythm of my marriage, into the routine of dinners and polite smiles and quiet sex with the lights off. But something had shifted in me, for good. I couldn't unknow what it felt like to be wanted like that, seen like that, touched with intention and hunger and care. I never saw Ethan again, not really. We exchanged a few texts in the weeks after, a simple "I miss you," a "hope you're okay." Then silence, the kind that's heavier than any argument. Sometimes I see someone who looks like him in a cafe or on the train and my breath catches, but it's never him. And maybe that's for the best, because what we had wasn't sustainable. It wasn't built for the real world. It was fire and shadow and stolen light, but still, on quiet nights, when the house is still, I close my eyes and remember the way he said my name, the way his hands knew every part of me like they'd been there in another life. And for a moment, just a moment, I let myself feel it all again, and then I breathe and let it go.